All right. Well, thank you, Maro, for joining us for a interview, joining us all the way from Jamaica. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm on the south coast of Jamaica on vacation, so I'm by the sea enjoying the Caribbean breeze.
Lovely. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. You are a fabulous woodworker. I've really enjoyed looking at your work, and I can't wait to talk to you about that. But let's go ahead and just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, my journey into the world of, I like to say, woodology started only 5 years ago. And well, I should say I got the aha moment 6 years ago, and then started my journey only 5 years ago, knowing absolutely not one single thing about wood other than it comes from a tree. And there's a couple different species of it. But other than that, nothing much. I had no uncle in the wood business. I had no class that I attended in high school or anybody that I looked up to that was in the industry. So it was a complete and total shift in my life when I decided to leave corporate to pursue what I felt was my purpose. That's a whole nother podcast right there, just figuring out how I got to that aha moment. That's a whole nother, yeah. And so when I had the aha moment, I was already 40, and I had made up my mind that I was not going to live into my 40s or head into my 40s not following my true purpose on this planet. And I believe so. I'm eighth generation Jamaican, and I always felt like there was a reason why I was born Jamaican and why I grew up here. I did 3 years of college in Canada and then came back home, and I just knew that there was something pulling me towards nature and environment and being able to create and make things, but I just didn't know what it was. And then I had the aha moment, and then started my journey with a phone call. And I said to a friend of mine who has a construction company, hey, listen, if you're clearing any trees, I want to have it. Like I would like to have my hands on it. And he was like, why? And I'm like, you just don't worry. I was like, I'm in a little village on the south coast, so it might get noisy from time to time. If
That's all
not, if
right.
I go by the sea, you're not going to hear me because it's so loud. Anyway, so he's like, what do you want to do with these trees? And I'm like, don't worry about it. I have a feeling I'm onto something. And he said, well, funnily enough, I just cleared this massive, what's called a guango tree, which looks similar to like a monkey pod or suar. I think you have it in over that side. So he's like, I just cleared this massive tree to build a tennis court for a client. Why don't you come and look at it? So I did. I went and I looked at it, and I was like, okay, what do I do? I mean, this tree was massive. And I decided to go buy myself a chainsaw, and I did. And I YouTubed how to even crank it and start it, because again, I know nothing. And I'm one of those females that I don't like to ask men for help. Like I'm going to figure this out on my own. Like I don't need your testosterone right now. so I was on a mission to figure out how to get this tree cut. So I did, and I taught myself how to use a chainsaw on this piece of wood, well, this massive trunk, and then I just started to play around with the chainsaw, and I taught myself how to carve, and I really just had a go. Sorry, there's a wasp. I just had a go with this tree, and that was really my canvas to start. And I never even thought about using only trees that were slated to come down for construction or for farming or for road works, or, you know, sometimes you get the tree where the roots are interfering with the infrastructure of the building, and they have to come down. It never really even occurred to me until I ended up with that first tree. And then I was like, you know something, I'm going to only use trees that are slated to come down or have fallen on their own or are already dead. So I do use a lot of dead trees. You know, lightning will strike them, or they're just old and they stop, you know, they're not vibrant anymore. And so just like that kind of became my mandate. And, you know, now 5 years later, that's all I do. I will not go to a lumber yard. I will not, you know, take a tree down that the owners don't give me a really good reason as to why that tree has to come down. And so that's that.
Wow, I love that, you know, and what a story. Thank you. And I hope that people listen to this and are inspired, because I'm 35 and I look back and I'm like, have I been using my time wisely? And I think you reiterated how important it is to look forward, that we always have a chance to, like you said, find our true purpose and our calling. So what a great example of that. That's just lovely. So, and I loved it. You were like, I didn't have an uncle or a family member in it, because that is such a common way women, you know, especially are introduced to woodworking, is through kind of whatever gatekeeping, you know, has been allowed for us. So I love hearing that you're just like, I'm gonna do this,
Right.
and finding that on your own. It makes me feel like you were really meant to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So amazing.
I believe I was, and I do want to, there's a little bit of a delay, sorry.
That's okay.
I do want to, just for the people, for the people listening or viewing this, it does not matter what age you are. I sometimes, you know, I would go through little spurts where I would feel like, oh, if I had only studied this in school, or only if I took like technical drawing, or only if I did this and that. And the truth is, I can't go back in time and I can't fix that. I can only look forward. And I'm 47 this year. So, you know, I'm not a young spring chicken. And so, you know, I don't know how much more time. I can tell you right now, my whole right arm is giving me no ends of trouble, and my neck from all of the, you know, the heavy machinery and stuff that I do, to the point where I have to now rely on team members to do some of my work for me, because I have physical limitations now from all of that work. And you just know that that's part of the course, and you just find solutions and you keep moving forward. No looking back, and it's never too late.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was part of the reason why I started doing the interviews myself, was because of back and neck problems, and, you know, just how life changes and you grow in age and health, you know, that people can't underestimate how important health is, and
Absolutely.
have to be able to balance it. You know, I'm guilty of sacrificing myself for doing what I love to do. I think, oh, it's okay if I hurt, I want to keep doing this. But you have to get to a point where you have to value yourself and know you can't continue down that road. It's not sustainable. So you have to give yourself the same care that you give your work. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Yes. So what is woodworking like in the Caribbean? You said, I think when we were talking, you're the only probably woman woodworker on the island of Jamaica. What's it like?
So there we have some carpenters and some woodworkers that are female, but I call myself a woodpreneur. That's the word I use for myself, because I don't have any machinery. So I have 2 workshops now in 2 different parts of the island, and I have no machinery in either workshop. Every single thing I make is with hand tools, electric hand tools and chainsaws. And so I don't think it's fair to call myself what's the right word, a woodworker in that sense, because I am more carving and creating these one-of-a-kind pieces, and my gamut runs wide. I go from jewelry to homeware to sculpted art to mirrors, and I do a lot of lighting. So I do all sorts of chandeliers, wall sconces, floor lamps, table lamps. So and everything is one of a kind. There's nothing, even my charcuterie boards are one of a kind. And my charcuterie boards are cut with a chainsaw. So, so everything, so just, there's nobody on the island, there's no female on the island that does all of what I just described. I can't speak to the Caribbean. Maybe there are some, and I'm just now getting into this community of female woodpreneurs or woodworkers. And so this is all very new to me. And so I was so happy to have found you. And it was just so exciting that there were, oh my gosh, I'm not alone in this world. There is actually a movement out there, and I'm so excited to join that movement and get that exposure and be able to speak to like-minded people, hear their journeys, their trials, their issues, and learn. And so being in the Caribbean, and especially being in Jamaica, it's a mixed bag. For the most part, I've had a lot of support. And I have definitely started a category that did not exist before. So that I'm very happy to be able to declare that. And that, nobody was doing live edge furniture before. Nobody was rescuing trees. Now, if a tree is being cut on the roadside, you'll see people drive up and try and take pieces, and that never happened before. Now they're seeing the value of a mango tree and what that can produce and different things like that. But on the flip side, I do have a lot of male egos that I deal with. And I know that every female watching this can relate to that. And so I don't get a lot of recognition that should be there, because it's just a male driven ego community. And I'm struggling to find the right words so that I sound politically correct, but I do have challenges when it comes on to some of the males in the industry. And the funny thing is, a lot of them just started, and they're replicating and doing a lot of the work that they've seen me do. And I'll get things like, hey, and they ask me for advice, and I'm an open book. I tell everybody everything, and they'll say to me, hey, listen, there's this way that you can actually level the wood that you probably don't know, but here's what you do. You build a sled, and you put the router on the sled, and you put it on and I'm looking at them like, are you serious? Like, dude, that was one of the first things I did was build a sled. Like, but like their egos just can't, like they have to be the ones to be like, and I'll have situations where, so my team is all men, right? So when we do these large, massive hotel installations, I'll walk in with like a crew of 5, 6, 7 guys, and I'm the boss, right? So I'll walk in, and let's say the welder for the property is there, and he needs to find out how to weld the brace for this piece to go on. He does not communicate with me. He communicates with one of my team members. And they work for me. They don't know the whole scope of the job. And I keep saying, hey, me, you're going to talk to me. Like, I'm the one in charge. This is me. This is my business. And they can't do it. They keep looking at the men because they can't fathom that here is this chick, that this is actually her business. Like, it blows their minds, right? They cannot. some of them. So like, as I said, it's a mixed bag. For the most part, tons of support. But you do have the one or two out there that yeah, you have to be like,
Wow. So this, and that's why I love this project, is because we are out there and we are connecting to each other, and I just love how we show up for each other. And the other thing that stands out to me is I ask everyone, like, what is it like in your culture, in your community where you are? What's it like? And every woman, or person that I interview has the exact same thing to say. And you brought up, like the workers couldn't break that. Almost, it's like instinctual for them now. It's been so ingrained in them to just
yeah,
automatically look for the man, and that is a
yeah,
universal experience globally.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. And I must say that my team members, because I don't call them my staff or my workers, I call them my team members, and they are exceptionally respectful of me. They are in awe. They love the guidance that and my guys that work with me are not trained either. So one was my painter, one was my gardener, one was like, I picked them from all, and then they came together, and we've all been on this journey together from the beginning. And I do have two very technically trained guys that work in factories, and they come to me on the weekends and they work with me on the weekends. So they are my technical advisors, because again, I'm not trained in certain things. And well, I'm not trained, period, but so they guide me in certain aspects. But for the most part, 99.9% of the time, my team members are very respectful of me, and they know and respect that I'm the one in charge. And when I start creating, they don't know until I'm very far into the process of what is actually going to become. So a lot of times when I start carving and I start going through, they're like confused. They don't understand what it is that I'm making. And it's right at like that 85%. They'll say, oh, it's a table, or oh, it's a light fixture. And then it just blows their mind, and they love it. They're just in complete awe of the whole process. Yeah.
that's really neat. Well, that's a good segue into my next question. What is a skill or technique that you're currently focused on? You mentioned carving. Is there a particular carving tool that you've been reaching for a lot lately?
So my introduction into carving tools really started with one second. Yeah. My introduction into carving tools started because I was helping my aunt with a bathroom renovation, and I saw the tiler with a grinder and a cutting wheel. And this was like maybe 4 months into me, commandeering and learning how to use a chainsaw, but not getting what I needed to carve with the chainsaw, and thinking, okay, there must be something out there that can allow me to do this. So I saw him cutting the tiles out with the grinder, and I said to him, do you know if that could be used on wood? And he said, oh, no. And I won't use it. I won't go into the Jamaican slang, but he just basically was like, no. This cannot be used on wood. I tried it once and it sliced my hand. And he's like, absolutely not. And I was like, something doesn't seem right. And I'm a very curious person. My curiosity is always up there. When I go to a restaurant, the first thing I do is look under a table, because I want to know how those legs were constructed and how they join them, because again, I'm not trained. So this is how I learn. So anyway, I go onto Google and I look up tools for grinding with in the woodworking industry. And sure enough, there's a whole range of attachments. And then I went on to Arbortech's website, bought a whole bunch of the Arbortech carving attachments, shipped them to Jamaica, and the rest is history. Like if I had one go-to tool, it would be my grinder with my Arbortech attachments. So I would say 90% of what I carve and create, I start with the chainsaw and then I move on to my grinder and my attachment. So that's my go-to tool. I do use the router a lot for different reasons, for different uses, but definitely the grinder. Definitely grinder. I also have a resin studio, which I started almost at the same time. So I do pour a lot of resin, resin and wood, you know, all the river tables. But I don't do what you see most of those woodworkers of resin in one color. It will take me like 4 weeks to pour a resin table because I layer it probably like an eighth at a time. And so when you look into my river tables, they're layered and they're 3-dimensional. And so I go a little stir crazy when I see all these people dumping these buckets of one color resin into these river tables. I'm like, no, there's so much more you could be doing right now with that. And I love the mixture of colors, and I really I get really into the resin. And it's not everybody, and I know a lot of woodworkers who say Jamaica put out resin, they are, but I love it. So there are pieces that I get that are super rotten, but you can see that there is a potential there, and I will use the resin to build up on those rotten spots and add some color variations to it. And so that would be another answer for you, would be working on my resin techniques and incorporating that into my wood. I do a lot of art, wall art with the resin and wood as well. So yeah.
Wonderful. I had to laugh because I think the first woodworking tool one of the first that I picked up was a grinder. So I had to laugh at that story. So yeah.
I don't know if you can see, I have a bunch of scars all over my hands from the grinder. Because even through my gloves and my overalls, I learned, and that's part of the course, right? I got chipped up quite a bit with the grinder, but that's how you learn.
Yep. It's weird. It almost kind of, it's just like part of it. It hurts so bad, but then it's also like kind of endearing to it too. It's like, I don't know, you get so connected to your work, you almost don't mind it. You're like, yeah, you know.
Absolutely.
It happens. Yep. It happens. So, well, cool. Well, what is your advice for someone that is looking to get into woodworking, that might live in an area where getting supplies or access to materials, even customers, could be challenging, like an island?
My advice would be to start out small. So when I first started, the first things that I made were floating shells, right? So I would make these really cool 3-dimensional. They're not just, you know, straight across. They, you know, have some sort of variation and vibe to them. And, you know, then I would consult with somebody that could tell me how to hang them and what would be the safest way to hang them. And then so that's what I started out with was just floating shells, because I found that it was one of the easiest things to make. So my advice would be is to find something that you enjoy making, that's pretty simple to make, and just become very good at that to begin with. And if you're in an area where you don't have a lot of customers, then where's your customer base going to come from? Is it going to come from your online community? And if that's the case, you can't be making a 40-pound floating shelf for an online-based customer. You have to start out with little things that can be shipped, that's light, and easily moved and affordable to most people. And you know, one of my main things, because one of my main things that I tell people is create what you feel, don't create what you see. And you can always get inspired by people in your community that's doing work that you love, but don't put that picture up on your workbench and try to replicate what that person has done, because then you'll never find your own lane and you'll never have your own voice. And it's so important when you're starting out to create your own voice. And a lot of people miss that because they're so busy watching the success of others and trying to basically run on their coattail, and they're missing out that it's really what really makes them successful is their spirit coming out and their soul coming out into their work. That's what makes their pieces unique. And so I would definitely say find your voice and start out very small and then build your way up. When I first started, I was under a tree. I didn't even have a covering. And so every time it rained, I would have to pick up my grinder, pick up my chainsaw and run and cover up the pieces with tarpaulin, with tarp. And that's how I started. And then as much as I could afford to, every piece I sold, that money went back into tooling up. So I went from a grinder to an orbit sander. Then I went from an orbit sander to a belt sander. And then I went from that into, I think I had a jigsaw at the very beginning. And then I got a circular saw. And then I got my routers. And so every single time, and then remember, I'm not trained. So every single time I would buy another piece of equipment, I would now have to teach myself how to use it. Because one of the things for me is no team member should have anything up on me. I should be able to know how to do every single thing. The only team member that I have now that has one up on me is my technical advisor, because he's super, like he's been in the industry for over 20 years. He's the only one. And otherwise, every single piece of equipment I buy, I have figured out how to use it, trial and error. The planer was probably the hardest one for me to get, because I'm aggressive, and you know, the planer, you have to finesse the wood, and I must confess that's probably my least favorite machine hand tool to use, the planer. And so I went tooling up, and then I went from that, and then I built a little shed, you know, with zinc. And then I went from that into now I have 2 locations. One location, I have 3 40-foot containers on a 2-acre property, right? So I went from being under a tree to a 2-acre property with 3 40-foot containers with, I mean, so many trees that I've rescued. It looks like Jurassic Park for wood. It's like, so yeah, so my advice would just be to start small. And even now, sometimes I get anxiety and I feel like I am not where I should be. And then I have to dial it back and remind myself how far I've come in such a short space of time, knowing absolutely nothing to begin with. And then I just like, okay, there's time, there's places to go. You can, you know, just relax. And yeah, that would be my advice.
That is spectacular advice. And that's so funny you called it the Jurassic Park, because that was like immediately what I went to was like you working under this like tree in this like vast jungle. That's amazing. But no, that's great advice.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned earlier about finding your purpose, and then you know, had spoke about finding your voice. And you're absolutely right. So many artists, well, a lot of people don't get to the point in their life where they actually find what their calling is. You know, they kind of just go through the motions and do what everybody else is doing, what they think they should do. So getting to that point is one part of the process. But to find your voice as an artist, I almost feel like you've like taken my class, because I've done like a whole section on it, because you're right. It is so important. It's so important. And that is what makes your work so stand out. And that's what, you know, there are how many other people out there doing charcuterie boards, but people come to you because they want yours, because it has your, like you said, your essence, your creative spirit in it, your voice.
Right.
So that is wonderful advice. So on that thread, you say to start small, but now let's flip it around. What is your advice for someone wanting to take on big projects? Because you take on some massive projects.
I know. So there's an emotion that I use as my guidance system, and that's fear. So when somebody calls me and says, hey, we're opening up an AC Marriott hotel and we want you to have the main sculpture as you drive through the gate. And I go, like, crazy fear builds up in me, then I immediately say yes. So it sounds weird, but how else am I going to grow and expand as an artist if I keep staying in my comfort zone? I have to push and do things that I've never done before. I had no idea where this wood was going to come from. I had no idea what the concept would be. I had no idea how I was going to install it or any of that. And it didn't matter. The answer was absolutely, I'm going to say yes. And then you figure everything out as you go along. And in every industry, if I can find people in Jamaica to advise me on how to hang, a 2,000-pound sculpture on a wall vertically, then certainly I'm sure in your communities where you're from, you can always find people to advise you, and you can ask. I am not ashamed of asking questions. I will cold call people and be like, hey, listen, I know you don't know anything about me, but this is a situation. I need your advice. And that's how I'm able to do a lot of what I do. And there's another female, she's much older than I am, and she's more a sculptural artist. So she will do stuff out of metal and all sorts of things. Her name is Laura Facey, and she does massive installations. And so I called her and I was like, I need your advice, and she was just so receptive and happy to help me. And then another thing I do as well is I find people on Instagram who are in Turkey or Costa Rica or Mexico, and I will ask them advice. And I also get a lot of questions from people all over the world asking me for advice now, which is just amazing. And so yes, so when you take on large projects, you want to be able to surround yourself with people who know what they're doing. And you're going to say yes. The option is not to say no. That's not an option. It has to be yes. And then you will figure out now how to make it happen, because there are enough people out there, even if they're not in your community, they're in your IG community or YouTube community, that will be more than happy to assist you. And another thing too, for me, like I surround myself with a lot of really good people, and they're very, like, my team members, as I mentioned before, they're always up for the challenge. They may cuss me at the beginning and, what is this? I remember that sculpture when I did that piece for AC Marriott. It took about maybe 12 or more guys just to take it out of the truck. We loaded it with a forklift from my workshop. And then when it got to the hotel, they didn't have any equipment on site at the time. And it luckily there were still construction workers there, and they were able to offload it off the truck. And it was just like, oh my God. And then we had to hire a crane. A crane is how we ended up installing it, but I got the advice of an amazing welder who ended up welding up all the brackets that I needed to hang something so heavy. And because they had commissioned me before the hotel was built, they were able to reinforce the wall and all of these things. So that part really, that worked out well. But the main key advice is say yes. You'll work it out. You'll figure it out.
That too is a universal experience. It's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but it sounds cool, and we're going to make it happen. And then you're absolutely right. The community on Instagram, and the global community, like you said, like are so supportive, and they're of the same, same mindset as like, it just sounds cool. We just want to help each other make these awesome
Yeah.
things and make each
Yeah.
other's dreams, creative ideas come
true.
true.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fabulous.
Yep.
That is just so
Yep.
wonderful. So,
and there's so many wood forums out there as well, that you can type in a question and you get all of this advice. So
absolutely. And I liked your emphasis on using your local community as well. Especially, I live very rural South Carolina, but you would be amazed what people can do that live out here. You by necessity figure out how to weld things, how to sew things up, do different things. And it's heavy farming too, so everyone out here can fix everything. It's, and those people, you never know. It's been interesting on projects to reach out to welders or different other types of craftspeople, and they're used to doing very like trade specific, trade focused, industry focused type of projects. So for them to get into a creative thing, I find really excites them, because they see we're excited about it and it's something different for them. So that's such a wonderful experience.
Totally. You're absolutely right. They love it. They get so excited when they get to do something that's not in their day-to-day, workshop, that they're now having to be like, hey, I can actually use my skills to do something else. And one of the things that I did when I was tooling up was I bought my own welding plant and my own chop saw. So now I do all my own welding in-house. So all of my legs, all of everything I do, all of my metal work, I now do it in-house. Yeah.
So cool. Very cool. Well, what would you say has been your most favorite project to date? Was that the Marriott project, or is there another one?
That's a tough one, because I get such joy out of creating everything. And, I kind of feel like my mandate is to breathe new life into these trees that are being cut down. And so just to be able to even make a cuff or a ring brings me such joy, because I know I'm breathing new life into this piece. I can't say that there was one specific project or piece that really stood out to me. With any large installation or any large piece comes a whole range of issues that you have to go through. And so, you get the good with the bad, and not to discourage anybody, but so I can't even say that one of the installations were my favorite, because there's so much emotion that goes along with that. Like, I remember when I was asked to do my first door project. So I made 4 massive doors for a huge facility on the North Coast. And I had never made a door before. And I don't know what I was thinking, but again, never say no. You'll figure it out. I learned so much on that job. And at one point I was like, what have I done? I can't believe I took this on. Like this is just so overwhelming. And then I had to talk myself down and be like, you can do this. You have good guys with you. This can work. And we pushed through, but let me tell you, it took so much out of me. And I was glad that I didn't give up. That was not an option. But, after it was done and completed and installed, and everybody just was so in awe of these doors. And I was like, okay, I see why it's worth it. I see why I went through all of this, But just to answer back your question, I can't say I have a favorite project, truthfully. I love everything I make. I love breathing new life into every piece.
Awesome. I love that. That's so cool. Well,
Yeah.
anything else you'd like to share? Any, big events or projects coming up?
Um, Not really. I have decided, so when COVID hit last year, my business quadrupled. I think because, yeah, I my business shot through the roof last year. And I'm so blessed and humbled for it. But it also burnt me out because I was not prepared or ready for it. So all the slabs that I had cut and were drying out, and we don't have any kilns in Jamaica. So all of my pieces have to be air dried. So it takes a while. And so I burnt through everything that I had been storing up. I can't even begin to tell you how many dining tables I made last year. And so by the end of last year, I was so burnt out. And I decided that come this year, 2021, I was no longer going to do commission work or custom work. And that I was going to go back to my original, because I didn't get into how I launched my business or anything. Again, that's a whole nother podcast. But when I launched with over 100 pieces, and I never had anybody telling me what to do or how to do it, or what size or what height, or how they wanted it hung. I just made, and I was in love with everything, in with life. I just felt like I was on top of the world. And then I launched, and then it was like, oh, can you make this? Oh, can you make that? And then you get on this wheel, and then that wheel just like got so crazy last year. And I said, you know something? I want to come off this wheel and dial it back a little bit and get back to what I really am passionate about. And that is allowing the trees to tell me what they want to become, and really vibing with that process and loving that process again. And so that's really the train that I'm on right now. It's just getting back to the fundamentals of just being able to have complete creative freedom and complete creative. I always use a mantra, I just want the freedom to be me. And so every day I wake up, I decide what I'm going to do. I don't have customers or suppliers dictating to me what I need to do today. And that's a balance that's hard to find. And I have a lot of people that are mad at me and angry with me and upset with me because I've told them no. And when I tried to explain to one lady why I was not going to make that lamp that she was giving me 15 different instructions on how to make, she looked at me and said, oh, wow, I see that you have commitment issues. And I looked at her and I said, yeah, that's exactly what my husband of 25 years says too. He said, yeah, yeah, I've been married 25 years, and my husband says I have commitment issues too. And I obviously being super sarcastic with her. I was like, how did you even get that? But she was so like upset that I had the audacity to tell her no. And so yeah, you have to feel so comfortable with yourself that you can feel okay with telling people no. And it's very hard to get to that point, because you feel like you're turning away business, and am I sending the universe the wrong signal? But you have to be no. You have to say, okay, look, I am following my true path, and my true path is to be able to create from my soul and not create what others want me to create. And it's not easy, but you can get there, and I'm there now. And so to answer your question, because I got off course a little bit, it's the vibe that I'm on right now is just creating what I want to create the day that I wake up.
That's amazing. Yeah. And no, you're right on point. I feel the same pain with commissions, and I'm finally to the place where I can say no, and holy cow, is it freeing. And I just want to say to anyone out there that's struggling with that, like, you mentioned, sending off the wrong signal to the universe. When you say no, you're making room for what's really made for you, you know, what's really meant for you.
Totally.
And your world just opens up
Absolutely.
so much more, you know, by closing one door, it's like three more open. It's just beautiful. So no,
Absolutely. Totally.
that was right on it. And I'm very excited for you just as an artist. What an exciting time to be able to just have free reign to create for yourself. That's just wonderful.
Yeah. And I want to make another quick point about that.
Yes.
What I find happens is when I create from my soul and I create what the tree wants to become, every single time I do that, somebody walks through my door and they're like, that's the exact piece I was looking for. And so the universe comes together, and I have never, not one single time, made a piece and sat on it for more than 2 weeks. As I make it, the right person comes along that connects with it, and it's gone. But it's a process you have to trust.
Yes, that is exactly right. And that's probably the hardest part, is trusting it and continuing to trust it. And you're right though, patience. It does come. Woo, giving me chills. I love this. This is why I love it so much. Well, I know you're not taking commissions, but how can people follow your journey and your new creations?
So I have 2 accounts. They're both business accounts. One is Mara.Harding, so Mara Harding, and that's really showcasing my personal journey into the world of Woodology. And then my other account is Mara Made Designs, and that's where I just showcase my finished pieces. So yes, so IG. I don't have time for, unfortunately, a website, because as I said, as a piece gets made, it's gone. And I am a one-man band, and I just haven't had enough time to really go through that whole website thing. So right now it's just Instagram.
Well, you know, it'll be interesting how that changes for artists, because Instagram it's becoming our portfolio. It's becoming our website. It's kind of eliminating the need for it. So very interesting, but wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. And this has just been such an inspirational talk. And I think we need to have you back, because it sounds like we have like 3 more different podcast topics, you know, or interviews we could have, which would be wonderful. But yes,
I can definitely speak to helping people launch. Like that's a whole, because before I went into woodworking, I owned and ran an advertising agency. So I had this marketing in my blood, right? So when I launched like that, I can help people with that whole aspect too, like how to launch a successful brand right off the bat.
Wow. We'll be talking again. Yeah. That's for sure.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your talents and your just wonderful energy with us.
Thank you. We'll talk again.
Bye.